Yeah, before I preface it by saying a Yungal Munji grandmother once said to me, we know the intervention was needed, but you could have asked us how you should do it. My question as a voter is, will the government's proposal for the National Voice consist of 24 people appointed by regional and local voices and not an elected group? And they'll have an 8-year term limit, and I understand that was what was recommended in the Calma Langdon report. So this is really directed at the government. Is that the proposal that you're putting up? And will the 24 voice members be full-time and salaried? So,
thanks
to the Minister.
Thanks, Philip, for your question. What we have now at the moment, and you're right, that comes through with the Calma Langdon report. What we have now is the working group, and Professor Marcia Langton and Tom Calma are two of the people on that working group, and there is a referendum engagement group, and all of those people on that group are there to advise us as to where we go. Now, in the coming months, we will be able to have a better response as to what we want to do. But firstly, the question is really about whether Australians want to enable First Nations people to have involvement in policies that impact and affect them. And I think we have to be very clear that that's what we're asking through the question that the Prime Minister put to Calma on Yolngu country as a draft question to all Australians. So yes, what Tom Calma and Professor Langton in their report has made available to us, we are still working through with all of that, but they will be considerable points for us in the long run.
Can I just add to that, that the Labor government have already picked their advisory body who is advising them now, and the other groups that they've set up, they've all been handpicked. Our communities haven't had a say.
But that's the issue
not
unusual.
Here.
It's not unusual.
Our people need to have a say on the grassroots level rather than the top down all the time.
But it's not unusual. It's not unusual. I mean, state and territory governments have that. No, it's perfectly normal for state and territory governments to have advisory groups, whether it's First Nations people, whether it's to do with the economy, whether it's to do with sporting bodies. This is what happens when you want to govern. But the question here is that if we did not work with First Nations people in developing a voice, then we would be attacked for not working with First Nations people, full stop.
Can I just say, as someone that was... Your question is a really good question because you've obviously looked at the detail of Tom and Marsha's report, and it is about local and regional voices feeding up into a national voice over time once that's bedded down. Our Cabinet put $38 million to start that process in the last budget, Assistant Minister. Your government cut that in your October budget, so that work that had started out of Tom and Marsha's report was already starting to be undertaken.
So and you've jumped straight... details. So you've had the details.
No, I said I agree.
So you've had the details, 38 million, and you knew. So you walk away saying you don't have enough details. No, very interesting point
Malarndirri, I'm sorry, Senator. I did say I agreed with local and regional voices. I was very upfront with that. That was the first thing I said. We put money behind that. That is very different to asking the question what it does to people.
Craig, you've been sitting there very patient, my friend.
You are, yeah. I'm enjoying this.
I mean, you're listening to this, and of course we'll come to your issue a little bit later with the Republic, and that's something else down the line. But at a base level, a first principles level, how do you approach this?
This is one of the most important questions, one of the most transformative moments in modern Australian history, post-colonial history, and the big question is what we have to answer. And what I think we're hearing here are the concerns in the community that have to be addressed. However, we have to keep bringing it back to the main question is whether we want to finally take this step to listen to the voices of First Australians. And we've never done so prior. This is an historic event. This is actually, I would say, it's more than once in a lifetime. It's once in many lifetime event for us to have an opportunity to listen. So listening to all of the...
And different points of view amongst
different points of view, that's right,
as well.
Exactly. And so we need to break down all of the different viewpoints, that's fine. But from a perspective as a non-Indigenous Australian, our responsibility is to listen to also a process that has the cultural authority and whereby the Uluru Statement, I think, had 250 leaders out at Uluru. And so, we're in a position where I think, not that I speak on behalf of other people, but from my own perspective, we're in a position where we're now saying, and the country of Australia is now saying, we're listening. And we want to listen to you. We want to bring this to life. There are issues over sequencing. However, this is really about embedding the rights to be listened to of First Nation people in our constitution,
so
which in many
your
respects
immediate response
is
to the
outdated.
principle of this is to say yes to the voice.
And we have to keep coming back to this.
That's your position.
Now, just on that.
It's not cultural authority. What the people who rocked up at Yalara, not Uluru, because remember the Uluru family said no to even using the word in the beginning. But the people that rocked up were the ones that were picked by the Referendum Council. They were funded. They were from organisations and corporations who already have a mandate in controlling our affairs in our communities. So the problem at that meeting, whilst they say there was consensus, what do you call 20 people walking out of a meeting? Do you call that consensus? Or do you call that something that you'd probably need to address before you continue down the path?
I'll give Tom a chance to respond to that.
Only that I wasn't at Uluru and wasn't part of the dialogues, but my understanding is that it was, after they had the dialogues, it was a community who identified who would be the delegates that went to Uluru or to Yalara. And they made
community.
If the community wants to pick an organisation, so be it. But it was led by the community. There were other groups that weren't invited and or weren't nominated by their communities who also turned up. And that's okay. That's part of a democratic process. But we can't say that it was the government or anybody else picked these people. The community nominated who they wanted.
The poor black fellas could not get all the way to Yalara. Can you imagine our communities who are struggling to survive each day, getting on a plane and going to the middle of the country and staying in a flash hotel? That was mainly organisations and corporations, and we've been saying it since that day. That's why the people walked out, because it was already a done deal with the people behind the scenes, and that's a frustration our people have.
That's, we've moved on.
But there wasn't a frustration for the Anangu people, and it wasn't a frustration for over 100 of the Aboriginal languages of the Northern Territory. If there was one time where we felt enormously proud of hosting First Nations people from across the country, it was that time, where the saltwater met the desert country, where the Yolngu came to Anangu country. That was where we felt incredibly proud to host it. It is an imperfect world.
It was cultural.
We will never, ever, as people, as humanity, get things perfect. But it is so important that we try and we never give up trying.
Our next